We are here at a time which is challenging, of course, uncertain. Anywhere I go, I was in Abu Dhabi, London, and here and on en route to Davos. And the first question is, what do you think of Donald Trump? And so I'm going to ask students to answer. But no one has a clear answer to this question, but that makes the world of governance and politics more exciting when there's, of course, uncertainty. But what is more critical is that the stable world order we once knew is being reshaped by intensifying competition between the major powers that are increasingly setting the tone for global affairs. This has cast a long shadow over regions like Asia-Pacific, where Malaysia calls home, and the EU has a growing stake. At the same time, the volatile energy prices, supply chain disruptions, and inflation continue to challenge the resilience of developing countries like ours. In this era of disruption, we must confront these challenges with resourcefulness, resilience, and a steadfast commitment. Now, in 2 years, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of dialogue relations between ASEAN and EU. And things have changed. This is at a time when chasm between global south and global north is perceived to be widening, and we have two polarities. Now, the relationship between EU and ASEAN is a long-standing and multifaceted relationship, which ties that stretch across trade, investment, security, and socio-cultural exchanges. Yet, as we seek to deepen this partnership, we must ground our efforts in realism. These two regional institutions, while united by shared goals, are fundamentally different in their origins and trajectories. The EU emerged in the shadow of devastating wars that reduced much of the continent to the rubble. The devastation was attributed to the nation state, seen as harbinger of discord and violent power. The European project was therefore designed to transcend the nation state and to respect honor and dignity of men and women, although I must confess that not all European governments appreciate this, as you have seen the different divisive position vis-à-vis the conflict in Gaza. ASEAN, to the contrary, was born in a different context in 1967. Its member states, many of them newly independent post-colonial nations, faced the delicate task of solidifying their sovereignty and nationhood amid the Cold War. Now, understanding these fundamental differences, to me, is critical to ensuring that collaboration between ASEAN and the EU is based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. The days of the marauding Europeans, as you see, are gone. And I believe no party, East or West, is prepared to see any slouching towards the painful and checkered history of Asia under the weight of colonization. Today, with the increasing economic assertiveness of ASEAN and China, and its consequential burgeoning wealth and more robust geopolitical voice, the erstwhile hectoring and condescension of the past must give way to greater earnestness in engagement and dialogue. The days of imposing the values or models of one culture upon the other are behind us. The time has come for a new paradigm in advancing ASEAN-EU relationship and partnership, one that has to be evenly placed on the platform equality, mutual respect, sensitivity to diverse needs, and the recognition of different paths to shared aspirations. In that sense, I find the EU's distinct challenge in recent years has been trying to understand the fine line between being a normative power and a norm exporter. The EU's well-intentioned policies can sometimes be perceived as overly prescriptive and risk creating an impression of Europe as a distant observer unaware of Southeast Asia's complex dispositions. How then do we begin and bridge this gap? How can the EU continue to lead as a mindful and nuanced normative power while ensuring that its policies uplift rather than alienate its partners? The answer, I believe, lies in pragmatism, flexibility, and a reasonable level of ambition. Europe and Southeast Asia are two of the most dynamic regions of the world, and there is much we can learn from one another. The EU's own efforts at sustaining active anti-regionalism are unparalleled, as demonstrated through mechanisms such as the African, Caribbean, Pacific ACP Partnership. ASEAN, with its emphasis on consensus and progressive liberalization, offers lessons in inclusivity and adaptability. Like the EU, Malaysia recognizes that the climate crisis is a defining challenge of our time. We have made sustainability a core pillar of our role as ASEAN chair in 2025 and committed to galvanizing the region towards bold collective action that safeguards our future without compromising our right to development and economic prosperity. However, the climate agenda exposes the stark inequities between developed and developing nations. The underwhelming outcome of COP29 highlighted the continued struggle faced by countries most vulnerable to climate impacts in securing the essential financing for mitigation and adaptation efforts from those who bear the greatest burden of responsibility for historical emissions and global warming. Partnerships are key to keeping the hopes of the Paris Agreement alive, and Malaysia appreciates the EU's ongoing support for Southeast Asia's climate positions. Transitioning away from fossil fuels, developing a regional power agreed, Indochina, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, up to Indonesia, building community resilience to extreme weather events, and conserving our rich biodiversity and natural carbon sinks. I call on the EU to deepen its support through climate financing, green investments, technical assistance, and capacity building. The adverse impacts of environmental degradation already bind us all, and it is only by strengthening the bridges of collaboration can we hope to navigate these challenges together. Now, students and excellencies, which include students, while we appreciate both literary and cultural significance of Palestinian-American Edward Said's powerful masterpiece, Orientalism, which challenged the objectivity of Western writings on Islam, nevertheless, we can't paint every European writer on Islam with the same brush. To my mind, we need to temper our overarching perception and to a certain extent, our own prejudices and predictions with greater objectivity and give credit where it is due. For instance, in Belgium, you have the renowned historian Anwar Ibrahim, according to whom the notion of total civilizational breakdown in the West consequent to the collapse of the Roman Empire was entirely misconceived. To his credit, Ibrahim's thesis is that the fall, in fact, signified the beginning of a new epoch in world history marked by Islamic contest with the Germans and Europe. It's interesting, in my exchanges, more Indonesians and Malaysians understand Anwar Ibrahim than some Belgians. This is just as introduction, a provocation to Belgian students. Now back to the German Jewish scholar, Franz Rosenthal, traveled to Istanbul in search of the original scripts in order to produce, among others, his magnum opus, the 3-volume annotated translation of the Muqaddimah of Ibn Khaldun, the 2 volumes of translations from At-Tabari's Tarikh al-Rasul wal al-Mulk, History of Prophets and Kings. These great works opened the door to greater appreciation of Islamic works for millions of non-Arabic speaking Muslims themselves. So the contribution of the German scholar, not only to the German and European audience, but to millions of Muslims throughout the world. In Europe, there was a prevailing view that after Ibn Rushd, Averroes, and Ibn Sina, Avicenna, the study of Islamic philosophy was on the wane. But then came the renowned French scholar, Henri Corbin. They pronounce in French a bit peculiar, but I'm trying my best. Now, Henri Corbin debunked such a notion with a plethora of seminal works, such as the History of Islamic Philosophy and Creative Imagination in the Sufi of Ibn Arabi. If I might stop it all, we have Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Germany's most accomplished poet-philosopher. Mind you, as popular in Asia, Southeast Asia, certainly in Malaysia. Drinking deep from the mystical well springs of Hafiz Divan. So inspired was Goethe that he produced his own masterpiece, namely the West Oslicher Divan, West Eastern Divan, where he declared, God is of the East possessed. God is ruler of the West, North and South alike. Each land rests with his gentle hand. Amen. I cite this in keeping with the title of my lecture today, because it was indeed an impassioned call to build bridges, celebrating the convergence of cultures, which is in your tradition as it is in mine, but largely ignored to the extent that concepts cosmopolitan and globalization is deemed to be alien. Today, in the face of xenophobia, cultural mistrust, and inter-ethnic suspicion and animosity, Goethe's immortal words cannot ring truer and more relevant. His profound engagement with the East resonated deeply with the Muslim poet-philosopher Iqbal. Can you imagine? One of the greatest European philosophers with one of the greatest minds among the Muslims, Muhammad Iqbal. Inspiring him, Iqbal, years later or decades later, to produce Bang-e-Dra, the call of the marching bell, evoking the robust reverberations of an equally powerful plea for the synthesis of the intellectual traditions of the East and the West. And these are the peculiar sort of lectures because normally people confine to geopolitics and economics. I want to appeal to the students to also listen to our tradition, our culture, and our humanity, which is lacking in these days and age. It therefore boggles the mind that today many of us consider the other, foreign or Muslims, or in the other part of the Muslim world, aliens, Christians or Buddhists, or among the Hindus, Islam, that is generally considered a threat. Here, a threat to European values, culture, and identity, which most unfortunately has become a most convenient narrative that fuels right-wing and populist politics. This instinct to label those perceived as different as invaders or rivals for political, cultural, and economic power must be countered with empathy and recognition of our shared human needs and aspirations. The truth is that throughout its history, Europe has incorporated non-indigenous cultures and ethnic groups into its social fabric, as we Malaysians do Islam is still a religion in the Federation. We are proud of our Muslim heritage. Malay culture is very much comfortable with Western influence, Western tradition, Western culture, not to mention Taylor Swift. In Malaysia and across ASEAN, we live in a region rich with ethnic and religious diversity. Humanizing the other remains one of the most effective ways to combat such biases, requiring a combination of exposure and education. We are mired in the age, unfortunately, of post-truth politics, where anyone today can fabricate truth from falsehood. Thanks to the rapid evolution of technology, social media algorithms now shape perceptions, interactions, reinforcing biases and undermining rational discourse. This is our challenge. But despite all these challenges, we know that when directed by human values, artificial intelligence can unlock advancements in healthcare, foster kinder societies, and improve education. We must therefore ensure that technology is developed inclusively with pluralism at its core for the benefit of humanity. I'm aware that making reference to this, I may be or might have repainted a picture of doom and gloom as we sail to the pivotal years that will shape our region in the decades to come. But acknowledgement to state the fact and not in a state of denial is perhaps better than embracing the fallacy, ignorance is bliss. The future of our regions, ASEAN, Europe, or Asia, and the West, lies in the decisions that we make today in terms of strategic partnerships. It is in fact predicated on our shared vision for security and stability of our regions, but most of all, efficient and consistent delivery of public goods. Now, as we chart the future of ASEAN-EU cooperation, let us do so with resilience as our foundation and mutual respect as our guide. I am extremely delighted I'm here, having met the Belgian Prime Minister, the interim Prime Minister, and EU leaders, and I've seen this commitment, which is, of course, a source of pride. Now, with that exception, all of them were delighted that I have decided to come here. So, and many of them asked me to convey their special regards to you. Such enormous influence you have. Therefore, let us remember that while norms and values inspire, it is partnership grounded in reality that truly transform our world. Thank you.